everyone, welcome to Will's Book Nook. I'm Will, and this is my channel, Pour Over Books. Today I am doing my wrap-up for August, and I'm gonna tell you about the books that I've read. So in August I read 9 books. I'm almost finished with the 10th, but I have like an hour left, but I am filming this wrap-up before finishing it. So maybe I'll mention it at the end as an honorary mention. I started the month with reading A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Guin. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about it, read any other of Ursula K. Guin's books. She's fairly well known. Shout out to her. I want to be her friend. When it comes to Wizard of Earthsea, I didn't love it. I gave it a 3-star because it was good. It was fine. I think the problem is, one, I'm not in the demographic for it because it's very much like a middle grade fantasy. And I'm in my 20s, late 20s. And so it just wasn't for me, and that's fine. And I just found the main character sort of annoying. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. I'm sorry. He was a child, and he acted the way children do. He was a child for half of the book. And for half of the book, he acted the way children do, and I'm like, oh wow. You're being a baby about these things. And then I remembered that he was, in fact, a small little boy. And then I was like, okay, that's fine, but you're still annoying. My favorite part of it was the world building. If you know me, you know that I used to really like The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. And in Patrick Rothfuss's books, you also have like the magic of things having a true name. And I know he originally got that idea from Ursula K. Guin's books, from the Earthsea series. It's such an interesting concept. I love the idea of things having like a true identity in the core. My favorite part of the book was when we were learning more about how this magic works. There's this scene in which the main character, don't know why I've forgotten his name. He's like being taught by a teacher, and a teacher's just droning on about how you can't call the whole sea by a name, even if the sea has a true name. You can't call the whole sea at one time, because every single area of the sea also has its own name, and every single fjord and bay and harbor also have their own names. And I'm like, this is so fascinating that things that have one name are split into smaller sections that also have their names. And I'm like, this is so cool. My second book was Slew Foot. Again, a very popular book, Slew Foot by Brom. I was delighted by it. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I love books about women being angry. I'm like, yes. Yes, give me more books about women being angry. If you don't know the concept of the book, it's basically puritanical age in North America. You have a colony, a small town of a bunch of people who came over from England. And our main character is this woman who's in a marriage to a very sweet man, but she doesn't really feel at home because she's not puritanical Christian and she doesn't really believe. And she's like really struggling with this identity of like being a wife and like having all this expectation specifically of like patriarchal puritanical Christianity sort of pushed on her. There is also like a creature that awakens in the woods. And it was such a good book. Oh my god. I can't say too much without spoiling all of it, but it was fantastic. I loved it. It kept me at the edge of my seat because I really didn't know where it was going. I thought I knew where it was going. And then it just like kept meandering and it's like slowly trudging around, and I just didn't, I kept being like, oh, I know where this is going. I know what's happening. And then it sort of slowly turned me around. And it was fantastic. I gave it a 4.5. Fun read, good read. I was surprised to discover that the author was a man. So, joke's on me. I was just like, a woman wrote this. And that's on me, I suppose. Next, I read Watch Over Me by LaCour, another 4.5 star. I'm reading a lot of good books this month. I read LaCour's We Are Okay a couple years back, And I was obsessed with that book. I'm still obsessed with that book. Nina LaCour has this way of like capturing emotions in the way that I sort of feel them. Her books are always very emotive, thoughtful, impactful pieces in like the slowest way. And this book is about a girl who is living with her foster family. She has turned 18, or she's about to turn 18, and she gets an internship at a farm where they adopt children. It's basically just like a big family of a lot of people who have been adopted slash are working at the house. And then she learns to find her place in the world, question mark. And like the atmosphere and like the writing and the imagery, there are ghosts. The physicality of being haunted by something from your past, and just like Nina LaCour gets me. Nina LaCour gets me. Love. I only gave it a 4.5 because it felt like something was missing on like a personal level. Like I would have given it a 5-star had I connected to the main character more, I think. Like I enjoyed her as a character, I enjoyed her as a part of the story, but I just didn't fully connect with her on a personal level. So 4.5 star, but like fantastic. The next book is a 5-star, Dead Collections by Isaac Fellman. This book, I don't even know where to begin. I don't know where to begin. This book is just so good. It was recommended to me by my wife. Shout out to her per Hugo. You can go follow them. I'll link their Bookstagram in the description below. Go follow my wife. This book blew my mind. It is brilliant. Once again, a very quiet, thoughtful, impactful, slow book. That might just be like the kind of books that I like. Might be my favorite kind of genre. Call me out. It is about Saul, who was an archivist and also a vampire. And one day he meets Elsie, who is donating all of their wives' items. And there's just like, there's so much here about like being trans, about gender, about being queer, about being a vampire and existing in a building that might be haunted and living a life that is haunted. And it is so good. There's so many things in this book, and I'm gonna read it again soon, and I'm probably gonna do a full review of this book because like it will not leave me alone. This book haunts me in like the best possible way. Read this if you are interested in vampires or queerness or fandom. It also talks about fandom, so like that's in here as well. Gonna be doing a full review on it. I've read a lot of other reviews of it, and people have very different opinions. So there will be a full review of this book out at some point. Keep your eyes open for that if you're interested. Next book I read was The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. I have wanted to read this book since it came out, because look at this cover. Look at her. Look at her. She's beautiful. She is gorgeous. I have looked at this book for... It came out in 2020, apparently. I didn't realize it came out that recently. I thought it had been out since like 2018. But it has been out since 2020, and every time we've gone to the bookstore, I have looked at this book and I've gone, I want to read that, because I'm a cover buyer. I buy pretty books. But I work so hard. My wife and I have this thing where we like, mostly we only buy books that we've already read. So we will get them from the library or read them online in audiobook or ebook format. And then we'll only buy the books that sort of deserve to be on our shelves. So we've read most of the books on these shelves. Not all of them, but most of them. That just means that I can't impulse buy books, because if I impulse bought books, there would be so many. And I would never finish them. Right now I have a physical TBR that is so full, and I'm just like, I don't touch it. So I had to wait until I finished this before I could buy it, but it is fantastic. I only gave it a 4-star because there was a little bit of ableism in there that I didn't love, but there was a lot to love. It's basically about a nurse who works in the maternity ward at a hospital in Dublin right after World War I during I think it's an influenza pandemic. So like, stuff is happening. Like, she's living in Dublin after World War I during an influenza pandemic. And I'm like, okay. And then it's also in the maternity ward. So she's dealing with sick women who have this very deadly influenza, and they are also pregnant and giving birth. And it just like, some of the parts were like leaning on horror. I had to stop because they so vividly describe the act of giving birth. I had to stop sometimes because I was like, oh my god, I cannot handle this. It enters this, like, giving birth from such like a medical perspective, because she's a nurse and everything happens from her perspective, and she's like, okay, I have seen this before, I'm dealing with it in these ways. But it was horrifying to read about. And then it's also about her relationship with this helper that she has, and her relationship with this new doctor, who's like the first woman doctor or whatever, who's also like a famous historical lesbian, like an actual historical figure. And it was all fantastic. The world building is super interesting. It's a very slow book, but it also like, it only takes place over 2 days. And like, that's fairly thick. There's 2 days in here. 2 days. And then also, knowing that it was published in 2020, and the way it deals with the pandemic, terrifying. Early on, I was like, this was published before the pandemic. And then I was reading it, and I'm like, I've experienced parts of this. And then I realized it had been published in 2020, and I was shook. But it made sense. Next book I read was also a 4-star, part of a series. The book is called Harvest of Sighs. This is the 3rd book in the series of 4 books, and they're all slutty books. I love them. I read the first book with my wife, and then we've sort of like read them together since, but separately. They're so much fun. They're very spicy. If any of my family are watching this, do not read these books. Do not read these books. No, stop right there. Basically, in this 3rd book of the series, we're following this friend group who are also all in love as they continue on with trying to solve a mystery that started in the 1st book. I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to spoil the 1st book. The 1st book is called A Lesson in Thorns, and it is a book to read if you're interested in like modern fantasy. I would say the 1st book goes towards more like magical realism, and then the farther in the series you come, the more like fantasy-esque it gets. I read these books if you like some good sex scenes, if you like some angsty, complicated romances, and if you, I don't know, have like a priest kink or something. Read these books. In the end, I gave this one a 4-star. I didn't love it as much as the 2 previous ones, mostly just because a lot of the book is spent in the head of Delphine, one of the characters, and Delphine and I have such similar anxieties. She is a fat, queer main character, and she sort of struggles her entire life with trying to be easy to love and easy to deal with, and she's constantly trying to suppress her emotions and her problems. And so much of this book is spent in her brain, and it just like increased my anxiety to like 2000. Every time I put the book down, I was like in her headspace, and it was not a fun time. Great book. Just maybe like a little too personal. I'm like, Sierra Simone really came out here to attack me specifically. And then I read Door of Bruises, which is the 4th book in the Thorn Chapel series. I gave this one a 4.5 because it focuses more on like my favorite characters in this book, which is Saint Auden and Poe, which are sort of like the angsty trio as they're trying to figure out their relationship with each other. There were some good plot twists that I sort of also saw coming. And then the ending, I have such complicated emotions about the ending, but it was like a beautiful emotional release after all these 4 books. But yeah, fun read. I'm glad I read this entire series. I can't wait to get physical copies of them. Next we have another slutty book. I read A Lady of Rooksgrave Manor by Katherine Moon. And this one was so much fun. Another one recommended to me by my wife. Thank you, Harper Hugo. I was expecting it to sort of just be like a fun, sexy book, and then it just like hooked me emotionally. I got so invested in these relationships. Basically, it's about this girl who has worked as a servant for her entire life, but is sort of struggling finding her place in the world because she's very slutty in like the best possible way. We're out here and we're reclaiming the term slutty because I'm slutty and this girl is slutty. I love her. I would die for her. Her name's Esther. Her employers lose all their money and have to fire all their staff, so she suddenly finds herself without a job. Then this guy, this doctor, is like, hey, I know you're sort of slutty. Would you be interested in working as like a sex worker in this specific house where monsters go to like get laid. And just like, you know what? That sounds like fun. And then she works as a sex worker, and then she gets this collection of men, and they all love her so much. So good. It's so good. And then there's some plot about like an evil villain who wants to like ruin everyone's happiness or something. But like the romance, the sex, amazing. 5 stars. And then the last book I read, I finished this book today. It is A Spindle Splinter by Alix E. Harrow. I gave this book a 5-star because it made me cry, almost made me cry while I was at work reading this during lunch. Shout out to Alix E. Harrow for making me almost cry during lunch. Once again, shout out to my wife for recommending me this one. My wife has the best taste in books. This month I have had a bunch of 5-star books. And Harper has recommended me all of them. They are all from my wife. So like, shout out to my wife for being incredible, for recommending me the best books only, and for knowing my taste really well. A Spindle Splintered is obviously a Sleeping Beauty retelling about this girl who is supposed to die after her 21st birthday because she has a genetic disease. For her entire life, she's been obsessed with like the myth of Sleeping Beauty for reasons that makes complete sense. And then on her 21st birthday, she jokingly goes to prick her finger on a spindle to sort of like live her Sleeping Beauty story. And then she gets tossed into like an alternate universe where she has to take part in a Sleeping Beauty story that is currently evolving. And it was so good, and it was so like emotionally impactful, despite being like so light and funny. It is so funny. It is such a funny book. It kept like throwing me for a loop with how funny it was. And it is all about like the power of like a narrative, and even if you don't have like the ability to change your own narrative, how it can be empowering to retell it in all these different ways. And like, creds to my wife for saying this, but it's all about why retellings can be so impactful. Because I have sort of not really vibed with the entire fairy tale retellings. I haven't really read any good fairy tale retellings. I haven't really been interested in them. But this one was a banger, and it talked a lot about why it's important to retell fairy tales. And I'm like, oh, I think I get it now. So, yeah. Read A Spindle Splintered. Also, it's so short. How could you not read it? Honorary mention to the book that I have 50 minutes left of, They Never Learned by Layne Fargo. Once again, I am reading a book about an angry woman. Blowing my mind. I have 50 minutes left of this one, so I can't really give you like a score yet. But if you follow me on my Instagram or on my Storygraph, I will let you know what I think about it. And that's it. That's all the books I read for August. This is obviously my first video, so like, comment below if you have read any of these books, if you have any thoughts on these books, if you have any ideas for videos I can do in the future. I'm definitely going to do a couple of reviews of these books, and I'm definitely going to be doing one of those newbie tags, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for giving me the time of day, and I hope to see you again. Bye!